Good day, ma'am. Good day, classmates. We are the Group 1 and we will be reporting Unit 1 entitled Nature of Learning and its Scope. So, what is learning? The term learning has been defined in so many ways. It simply refers to studying basic subjects in schools from teachers, books, or internet. But learning is actually more than that. Learning is the relatively permanent change in a person's knowledge or behavior due to experience. Learning definition has three components. So first, the duration of the change is long-term rather than short-term. Second, the focus of the change is the component and structure of knowledge in memory or the behavior of the learner. Third, the cause of the change is the learner's experience in the environment rather than fatigue, motivation, drugs, physical condition, or physiologic intervention. A change in human disposition or capability that persists over a period of time and not simply attributable to processes of growth. A process that is active, process of engaging and manipulating objects, experiences, and conversations in order to build mental models of the world. Learners must build knowledge as they explore the world around them, observe and interact with phenomena, converse and engage with others, and make connections between new ideas and prior understandings that involves enriching, building on, and changing existing understanding where one's knowledge base is a scaffold that supports the construction of all future learning. Also, learning is a process that occurs in a complex social environment and thus should not be limited to being examined or perceived as something that happens on an individual level. Learning is situated in an authentic context, provides learners with the opportunity to engage with specific ideas and concepts on a need to know or want to know basis. First, motor learning. Motor learning are most of our activities in our day-to-day life. The example of motor learning are walking, running, skating, driving, climbing, and etc. All of these activities involve the muscular coordination. Second, we have verbal learning. So verbal learning involves the language we speak, the communication devices we use. Here are the examples of verbal learning are signs, pictures, symbols, words, figures, sounds, and etc. are the tools used in such activities, and we use words for communication. Third, concept learning. Concept learning requires higher order mental processes like thinking, reasoning, intelligence, and etc. We learn different concepts from childhood. For example, when we see a dog and attach the term dog, we learn that the word dog refers to a particular animal. Concept learning involves two processes: abstractions and generalization. This learning is very useful in recognizing and identifying things. Fourth, we have discrimination learning. Differentiate between stimuli and showing an appropriate response to these stimuli is called discrimination learning. Example, sound horns of different vehicles like bus, car, ambulance, and etc. Fifth, learning of principles. Individuals learn certain principles related to science, mathematics, grammar, and etc. in order to manage their work effectively. These principles always show the relationship between two or more concepts. Example, formulate, laws, associations, correlations, and etc. Next, problem solving. This is higher order learning process. This learning requires the use of cognitive abilities such as thinking, reasoning, observation, imagination, generalization, and etc. This is very useful to overcome difficult problems encountered by the people. So lastly, we have attitude learning. Attitude is a predisposition which determines and directs our behavior. We develop different attitudes from our childhood about the people, objects, and everything we know. Our behavior may be positive or negative depending upon our attitudes. Example, attitudes of nurse towards her profession, patients, and etc.
Defining learner-centered. So, learner-centered education is about an entirely new way of seeing, thinking about, and acting on education. So, there has been a strong advocacy and push for learner-centeredness in educational practice, especially in curriculum development and teaching methodology. Planning and implementation of educational practice should have the learners as its focus. It is expected that theories of learning and their applications should be learner-centered, because learner-centered is a perspective that focuses on individual learners, their heredity, experiences, perspectives, backgrounds, talents, capacities, and needs with a focus on learning, the best available knowledge about learning and how it occurs, and about teaching practices that are most effective in promoting the highest levels of motivation, learning, and achieving for all learners. Here, the following are the learner-centered principles. First, they pertain to the learner and the learning process. Second, they focus on psychological factors, primarily internal and under the control of the learner. Third, they deal with external and contextual factors that interact with the internal factors. Fourth, they are seen an organized set of principles, no principle to be viewed in isolation. Fifth, the principles are classified under cognitive, metacognitive, motivational, affective, development, social, and individual difference factors related to learning. Sixth, these principles apply not only to all learners but to everybody involved in the educational system, as for example, teachers, administrations, parents, staff, and guidance counselors. So now, we will discuss about the 5 current learning theories in education. First, behaviorism. The behaviorism is a pedagogical theory that defines learning as a process of knowledge acquisition that takes place through observation. So based on objectivity, quantifiable events rather than introspective Schoology. It is no doubt that you have probably heard of Pavlov's dog before. Pavlovian conditioning, named after the Russian physiologist Ivan Pavlov, discovered that he could trigger salivation in dogs through the use of a bell. After associating that bell with food, educational theorists through such B.F. Skinner revised Pavlov's theory of learning by association by putting forward a theory of operant conditioning that demonstrated that behaviors of learners could be influenced by positive or negative reinforcements. How does behaviorism translate to the classroom or corporate training environments? Behaviorism confirms that learning is strengthened through repeated action, and therefore, having a systematic routine where knowledge is revisited repeatedly will undoubtedly reinforce learning. So next is feedback. Feedback is also an important component of behaviorism, especially when it used as a form of positive reinforcement. In order to strengthen positive association with learning, the timing of the feedback matters. Behaviorist is feedback. Would argue that feedback to be an effective form of association, it also be immediate, something that becomes much more achievable in the microlearning context when students receive instant rewards for correctly completing tasks or frequently logging in. However, it is important to note that the behaviorist school of thought is almost entirely dependent on teacher or instructor input and views the learner as a passive recipient of information. Next is cognitivism. Cognitivism, as suggested by the name, focuses on cognitive processes of the mind, such as thinking, memory, recall, and problem solving. Similar to behaviorism, cognitivism is about learning via association. However, the emphasis is placed on internal processing rather than the external environment. In contrast, behaviorism associations are based on creating links between new understandings and prior knowledge. Cognitivism also differs from behaviorism by acknowledging the learner's process and encode information in different ways. Social cognitive theory, or SCT. Social cognitive theory, or SCT, is a major stand of cognitivism that asserts that observing others, especially one's peers, is the most effective form of knowledge acquisition. Collaborative problem solving, discussion-based activities, and peer-to-peer teaching are ideal activity formats that enable social interaction that enhance learning. Other methods of association might include using mnemonics, analogies, or visual cues. So next is constructivism. Constructivism is a student-centered learning theory that is based on cumulatively building understandings from students' prior experiences and knowledge. In other words, to continue the construction analogy, learner becomes a process of constructing new knowledge on the foundation of what is already known. Essentially, it is places learning in a familiar context and aims to translate abstract theory into relatable concepts. Constructivists based learning is always relevant. Any standalone theory should be reframed to have links to practice or real-world scenarios. Whether knowingly or unknowingly, most classroom teachers will be taking a constructivist approach to every lesson when they use engagement hooks that relate back to the world of the student and provide an association anchor for new information about the be introduced. Knowing the students of learner audience is absolutely essential when practicing constructivism as an educator. Pre-assessments, surveys, interviews, and learning journals. Those are useful tools to be used before and during any learning experience. It is also provides an alternative to teacher-directed curriculum design by essentially allowing student experiences to dictate the direction of learning. Because constructivist-oriented learning revolves around the understandings and experiences of the students, it is inherently a dynamic and ever-changing process. Next is humanism. Humanism approaches learning and education with a growth mindset. Similar to constructivism, humanism is a school of educational thought that is inherently student-centered. Humanistic education derives many of its values from the intellectual movement of the 17th century, where philosophies such as Voltaire in 1642 to 1778 believed that humans were born with innate potential. Humanistic education focuses on fostering individual potential and personal growth. Humanism tends to be even more individual-focused than constructivism, with an emphasis placed on choice and autonomy. Educators adopting a humanist approach aim to foster self-directed learning among students. In the belief, intrinsic motivation to learn comes from this. In order to support self-directed learning, teaching students how to learn becomes a key priority. Along the same lines, humanist educators believe that learners should be given opportunities to evaluate their own learning, whether that be through formalized self-assessment or descriptive, reflective journaling. Humanism gives weight to the cognitive, which is knowledge, and affective, which is feeling domains, which not only impacts what and how content is conveyed, but also how outcomes are measured. A humanistic education aims to redefine what traditional academic success looks like. When it comes to measuring student outcomes, humanistic educators take a more holistic view in that they view emotions, moral understanding, and knowledge as equally important outcomes in a learning experience, and therefore tend to avoid traditional grading. Next is the connectivism. Connectivism is inherently a future-focused learning theory. It is a relatively recent pedagogical view that takes into account the changing nature of knowledge acquisition in our digital age. In contrast to constructivism, which revolves around what a learner already knows, connectivism pinpoints what a learner needs to know and targets the learning at a relevant time of need. Next is the connectivist. Connectivists generally believe that expanding knowledge is ultimately more important than taking into account prior knowledge. Connectivism allows learners to situate new knowledge within existing schemas of understanding. Similar to humanism, connectivism empowers students to make their own learning decisions. Students are aided in this process by technology, which assists in threading together different strands of knowledge. Connectivist educators aim for precision in breaking up content into discrete segments in a form of short strategic bursts of learning, very much in the line with science of microlearning period. Connectivism mirrors our ever-changing digital landscape in that it is forever changing and never static. According to Simmons 2004, a core principle of connectivism is that learning and knowledge rest in diversity of opinions. Connectivism recognizes that learning is a continual lifelong pursuit that reflects a continuous learning cultures in corporate environments.
Now, we were going to talk about pedagogy and andragogy. What is pedagogy? Pedagogy refers to the theories and methods used in teaching. However, in the past, pedagogy referred specifically to the method used to educate children. It literally means leading children. The method and practice of teaching, especially as an academic subject or theoretical concept. The relation between applied linguistic and language pedagogy. What is andragogy? Andragogy, which is coined by Malcolm Knowles, focuses on the practices used to teach adults. It is the method and practice of teaching adult learners, adult education. Much has been written by andragogy in general education circles over the past 50 years. What is the difference between pedagogy and andragogy? Pedagogy is the teaching of children or dependent personalities, while andragogy is the facilitation learning for adults who are self-directed learners.
Characteristic of young learners. Number 1. They can learn through talking about themselves, families, and their lives. Number 2. They are curious to learn and discover new concepts on their own. Number 3. They like to use their imagination and to discover things. Number 4. They naturally need to touch, see, hear, and interact to learn. Number 5. Because their attention span is limited, they need engaging and entertaining activities in order to not lose interest. Number 6. They like to cooperate and work in groups. Number 7. They need support and encouragement while learning. Number 8. Teachers need to work their students individually because they need to be guided. Characteristic of adolescent learners. Number 1. They are in search for personal identity. Number 2. They are in need of activities that meet their needs and learning expectations. Number 3. They become disruptive when they lose interest in the lesson or feel bored. Number 4. They need help and support from the teacher and to be provided with constructive feedback. Number 5. They can draw upon a variety of resources in the learning environment, including personal experience, the local community, and the internet. Number 6. They need the teacher to build up bridges between the syllabus and their world of interest and experiences. Number 7. They can learn abstract issues and do challenging activities. Number 8. Their personal initiative and energy are moved into action through meaningful involvement with relevant and current content. Characteristics of adult learners. Number 1. Adults are more disciplined than adolescents. Number 2. They have a clear understanding of their learning objectives. Number 3. They need to be involved in choosing what and how to learn. Number 4. They prefer to rely on themselves and work on their own pace. Number 5. They come to the classroom with a wide range of knowledge, expectations, and experiences. Number 6, they are able to do a wide range of activities. Number 7, adults learn at various rates and in different ways according to their intellectual ability, educational level, personality, and cognitive learning styles. Number 8, they come into the classroom with diverse experiences, opinions, thoughts, and beliefs which need to be respected. Noel's assumptions about adult learners. In Noel's theory of andragogy, outlines have 5 assumptions. Number 1, self-concept. Adults move from being dependent on others to self-direction as they mature. Number 2, experience. Adults gain experience as they grow that in turn becomes a valuable tool in learning. Number 3, readiness to learn. The priorities of adults shift as they begin to increasingly value and therefore more ready to learn about his or her role in society. Number 4, orientation to learning. Adults change their perspectives on learning as they grow, moving from procrastination to immediate application and from subject interest to problem solving. Number 5, motivation to learn. Adults move from extrinsic towards intrinsic motivation as they grow and mature.
Types of knowledge. Understanding the nature of knowledge is imperative because it is one of the outcomes of the learning process. Before the person develops certain skills and attitudes, he has to have the knowledge first. Now, we will discuss the 11 types of knowledge that the experts and researchers identified and classified that knowledge have several ways. First is the posteriori knowledge. A posteriori is a Latin word from that which comes after. This knowledge comes directly from our own personal experiences. When we talk about posteriori knowledge, we are talking about knowledge that comes after we have some experiences. A knowledge that is a result of our own experience. An example. In education, there are so many social constructivist theories believe that a posteriori knowledge is excellent for learning because it helps students develop neural pathways. Learning by doing, experiencing, and discover are also popular in 21st century educational approaches such as a phenomenon-based learning, problem-posing education, and play-based learning. Second is the priori knowledge. The priori knowledge is the opposite of posteriori knowledge. It is a knowledge and facts that exist without the need to experience them. A priori knowledge can be conclusions from reason alone. An example, 1 plus 1 equals 2. You can figure this out without actually getting to see their things and placing them in front of your eyes to count them. Priori knowledge can be used in mathematical principles to figure it out. Another example, the engineer is able to order a multi-million-dollar bridge to be constructed and be confident that it will withhold the weight of trucks and cars because he used his priori knowledge of physics to guarantee the bridge would hold its weight. The third one is dispersed or distributed knowledge. A dispersed knowledge is a knowledge that no single person has the capacity to see in its entirety. This kind of knowledge is dispersed or spread out among many different people. If you want to bring a whole lot of knowledge together to achieve something great, we need to get a team of experts of different topics together to input their knowledge to achieve our goals. An example, A surgeon may be an expert in fixing a heart, but he could not conduct a surgery without another specialist and anesthesiologist who have knowledge and perspective that a surgeon is not trained in. The fourth one is domain or expert knowledge. A domain or expert knowledge is a deep knowledge about a particular domain or discipline. A person with a domain knowledge is incredibly knowledgeable within their discipline but may just have general knowledge about everything else. For instance, after compulsory education ends, many people continue studying at university. When we go to a university, we get the opportunity to specialize in a specific domain. Maybe it's computer sciences, communication studies, or teaching. Many such university degrees are all about developing specific domain knowledge rather than broad generalized knowledge with the possible expectation of liberal arts degrees. The fifth one is empirical knowledge. An empirical knowledge is a knowledge that obtained through the senses. It's distinct from a posteriori knowledge because empirical knowledge must be experiences through the senses. As you can see, posteriori knowledge derived from innate experience, while empirical knowledge is a knowledge derived from experience observable by the senses. Mostly in research is an empirical. If you have read a piece of research in a journal article, it will report on something that is observed, such as answers to interviews or research participants' responses to an exam. Sixth, encoded knowledge. Encoded knowledge is recorded in symbolic codes. This makes knowledge easily retrievable by people who know how to decode the knowledge at a late date. It may also called stored knowledge. An example, written English is a code of our language. We encode knowledge when we write it down and anyone who reads it can decode it at a later date. Another example is generalizable codes in the road signs. Red octagon means stop, green light means go. The seventh is tacit knowledge. It is a knowledge that you have but cannot express. A person with tacit knowledge has usually had that knowledge for so long that they cannot remember how they learned it or why is it true. It is useful, accurate knowledge that exists in the mind. An expert vet knows how to connect with a horse and settle its nerve, but may be unable to explain how they can develop that relationship so quickly. An expert teacher may be able to diffuse a troubled situation in a classroom, but not really be able to explain to their apprentice teacher just how they did it. The eighth one is explicit knowledge. Explicit knowledge is the opposite of tacit knowledge. It is a knowledge that can be easily explained to outsiders. It is a knowledge that we could quickly codify into words and express to others. For instance, in teaching, it involves guiding students through the process of methodological way. Once the student has been explicitly modeled the knowledge, the teacher steps back and lets the student practice applying their new knowledge without support. Ninth is imperative or procedural knowledge. Imperative knowledge is knowing how something should be done. It is knowledge about how to carry out tasks effectively. It may involve specific steps or a general understanding of the process by which something gets achieved. Others hold the secret to their imperative knowledge close to their chest, such as when a grandmother passes down a family recipe to her grandchildren. descriptive knowledge. It's also known as propositional knowledge. Descriptive knowledge is knowing that something is true. Descriptive knowledge can be learned through memorization or does not require significant practical experience in the field. By contrast, imperative knowledge usually requires practical skills in a task. Example: century teaching pedagogies like behaviorism focus exclusively on descriptive knowledge. Students learn facts through passive learning without being given the opportunity to apply them to the world. Last but not the least, situated knowledge. Situated knowledge emerges out of specific context, community, or culture. It is specific to that situation and is hard to understand from outside of the perspective. All of us have situated cultural knowledge that inherited from our cultures. Others might have different knowledge that has grown from different cultures, and you may find it hard to understand their knowledge from your outsider's perspective. An example: someone should take up an apprentice as a baker's aide in order to learn how to bake bread rather than to learn it from people. Thanks for watching and listening. Hope that you have learned something from our report. Thank you.